NASCAR may have had good intentions behind their actions this past weekend, but unfortunately those actions have led to a blinding and extremely polarizing spotlight being shown on one of their drivers, Bubba Wallace. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. We have a couple of things to talk about in today's episode. I do want to talk about the TV ratings from Monday's postponed Cup Series race at Talladega, because I must say they were pretty impressive for a postponed race. I do want to talk about that, but of course the bulk of today's episode has to discuss the super mega ultra trending news story surrounding the findings of the FBI investigation that took place at Talladega on Monday regarding the noose that was found in driver Bubba Wallace's garage stall on Sunday. Well, yesterday afternoon, the FBI, in conjunction with NASCAR, concluded their investigation and released their findings, saying 15 FBI special agents conducted numerous interviews regarding the situation at Talladega Superspeedway. After a thorough review of the facts and evidence surrounding this event, we have concluded that no federal crime was committed. The FBI learned that garage number 4, where the noose was found, was assigned to Bubba Wallace last week. The investigation also revealed evidence, including authentic video confirmed by NASCAR, that the noose found in garage number 4 was in that garage as early as October 2019. Although the noose is now known to have been in garage number 4 in 2019, nobody could have known Mr. Wallace would be assigned to garage number 4 last week. Shortly after that was released by the FBI, NASCAR released their own statement. The FBI has completed its investigation at Talladega Superspeedway and determined that Bubba Wallace was not the target of a hate crime. The FBI report concludes, and photographic evidence confirms, that the garage door pull rope fashioned like a noose had been positioned there since as early as last fall. This was obviously well before the 43 team's arrival and garage assignment. We appreciate the FBI's quick and thorough investigation and are thankful to learn that this was not an intentional racist act against Bubba. We remain steadfast in our commitment to providing a welcoming and inclusive environment for all who love racing. So after I read those two reports yesterday, those two statements, my reaction really is tough to put into words. I guess at first I was relieved to know that this was not, in fact, a hate crime committed by someone within the NASCAR industry. My second reaction is that even though it's now been determined that this whole ordeal was basically a misunderstanding, I do not believe that takes away from the incredible show of unity and solidarity that NASCAR drivers, teams, and management showed Monday afternoon before the race at Talladega. It was a memorable moment that showed the entire outside world that NASCAR really is one big family, one big community that sticks up for one another. Thankfully, it turns out Bubba Wallace was not actually, maliciously targeted, but Monday proved that should a driver be targeted like that, the entire industry is ready to step up and support that person 100%. That all was my reaction when news came out yesterday that this whole thing was basically a misunderstanding. That being said, the drama of the last couple of days is not going to go without consequences. A brief timeline of events in the order that they transpired. The NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega was supposed to be run Sunday afternoon, but due to ongoing weather, the race ended up being postponed to Monday. But Sunday afternoon, according to NASCAR's initial statement, late Sunday afternoon, a Richard Petty Motorsports crew member, a 43 crew member, found a noose in their garage stall and reported it to a NASCAR official, and it got escalated up to the top. Ultimately, NASCAR president Steve Phelps had a conversation with Bubba Wallace, the driver of the 43 car, the only black driver in the NASCAR Cup Series, to discuss what his crew member found and how NASCAR was handling it. This all happened late Sunday afternoon into Sunday night. Late Sunday night, then NASCAR went out of their way to put a statement out discussing what they had found and where they were going next. In that statement, they say NASCAR was made aware that a noose was found in the garage stall of the 43 team. They then said, "We have launched an immediate investigation and will do everything we can to identify the person responsible and eliminate them from the sport." With that all being released to the public and making the rounds Sunday night and into Monday morning, Monday afternoon at the start of the NASCAR Cup Series race, of course, all of the NASCAR Cup Series drivers worked together to push the 43 car to the front of the grid before the race began, with all of the crews, the officials, everyone really at Talladega that weekend following close behind, basically marching down pit road. And during the national anthem, Richard Petty, as well as all 39 Cup Series drivers, plus Bubba Wallace, stood together around the 43 car during the entirety of the pre-race ceremonies. It was a great gesture. It was a powerful gesture, a powerful way to begin Monday's Fox broadcast. The race then happened as per usual. It was a fantastic race. I talked about it in the video later that night. And then fast forward to Tuesday. Tuesday afternoon, the FBI releases their findings saying that it was all a misunderstanding, that they do not believe Bubba Wallace was the victim of any sort of hate crime. I gave you guys my reaction already, but the reason I give you that timeline, a brief timeline there, a brief recap, is to highlight the consequences. Now, of course, a lot of people, most of them outside of the sport of NASCAR, want to blame Bubba Wallace for this. They believe Bubba Wallace made this whole thing up as a hoax to get publicity, to gain attention. If you actually read the statement from NASCAR, the statement from the FBI, both statements say that that is not true. In fact, NASCAR President Steve Phelps held a press conference earlier last night, and in that conference with the media, he once again reiterated that Bubba Wallace did not see the noose. It was a crew member that brought it to NASCAR's attention. It was Steve Phelps personally who delivered the message of the noose to Bubba Wallace that evening. According to the FBI, according to NASCAR, it was not Bubba Wallace's decision to put the noose there. It was not him who had anything to do with the noose being present in the garage stall. It was not even him who reported it, and it sounds like he did not actually see the noose in person. He only saw photos of it that kind of circulated afterwards, which we'll talk about in a minute. So people online, most of them, again, outside of the sport, who are trying to suggest that Bubba Wallace created the whole thing himself, that is objectively false. I think the most notable damage that has been done in all this is that NASCAR's credibility has certainly taken a hit. Going back to that timeline, late Sunday night, it was NASCAR who, unprovoked, unprompted, released the initial statement saying that they discovered a noose in the 43 garage stall. It was NASCAR who decided to make that public despite no pressure from anybody else. In fact, from the sounds of it, there were no reporters that knew about it, no photos of it. The only people who seemed to know about it were the crew guy, I guess NASCAR officials, and I suppose Bubba Wallace after Steve Phelps told him. Nobody else seemed to have any knowledge of the incident, of the noose, but NASCAR went out of their way to make a statement late Sunday night. And I read you their initial statement just a moment ago. Now, I believe NASCAR thought they were doing the right thing. In their eyes, someone had threatened one of their drivers, and it was important to them to get ahead of this story and release this news as quick as possible, make it public, to indicate that things like this will not be tolerated in NASCAR. It makes sense from a PR perspective. It sounds like a good move. However, in that initial statement, NASCAR says that they're going to do an investigation, and within a few short hours, the FBI was involved. And so my take on this is, if you were already planning on launching an investigation to determine all the facts, determine what actions need to be taken, if you were already planning on getting the FBI involved, why make that statement at all? Why make such a vague opening statement that makes such a bold claim? Like I said, nobody was aware of this noose. It was not some sort of elephant in the room that everybody was waiting on them to address. Nobody knew about it until NASCAR went out of their way to discuss it and make it public and shock the world. It would have been relatively easy for NASCAR to handle that investigation internally. They could have waited a day, because that's about how long it took for the FBI to reach their conclusions. They could have waited a day before putting out a statement, but unfortunately, by perhaps jumping the gun slightly, NASCAR has put an extremely polarizing spotlight on Bubba Wallace. All day yesterday and even today, Bubba Wallace, NASCAR, the fake hoax, trending all up and down social media. Bubba Wallace's name is being dragged through the mud, thrown under the bus, largely by people who are not familiar with NASCAR, and like I mentioned earlier, aren't entirely familiar with the entire story here. And the vast majority of this criticism is 100% unfair to Bubba Wallace. Look at this from Bubba Wallace's perspective, if you will. He never saw the noose in person. He was approached by the president of NASCAR, who told him what they had found and what he believed it was. Bubba Wallace reacted to that, I think, the way anybody would if they felt threatened, especially in this current political and social climate, even given some of the recent stories around NASCAR regarding the Confederate flag, regarding some of the, I would say, relatively low-scale protests. We saw there was a few pickup trucks outside of Talladega. When I say a few, it was like 3 pickup trucks with Confederate flags on them before the race at Talladega. Obviously, there was the plane overhead. So with the protests, with Bubba Wallace's stance recently on the Confederate flag, with all that in mind, it's not crazy for NASCAR to perhaps, for Steve Phelps to perhaps, for Bubba Wallace to perhaps take this news seriously and treat it as a legitimate threat. It's not crazy. He reacted to that news the way I feel like anyone would in that situation, and the way anyone should. I think he was fair to do so. Ultimately, it was a crew member who brought the noose to NASCAR's attention, and it was NASCAR who chose to make that news public. It was not Bubba Wallace during any of that. Everything Bubba Wallace did, from the statement he put out late Sunday night after the initial report to the entire pre-race sort of ceremony on Monday, everything Bubba Wallace did, he did based off of information he had gotten from top NASCAR officials. Therefore, I do not believe that Bubba Wallace should be blamed for the misunderstanding. Now, Bubba Wallace did go on CNN late last night to once again deliver his side of the story, given the new information that had come to light. I watched the entire interview. A lot of very powerful, a lot of very emotional. Bubba Wallace is a very emotional guy. A lot of very emotional quotes in that. a couple quotes that I think maybe were not the best things for Bubba Wallace to say if he really wants to move past this, but I'll mention some of the highlights. "I'm pissed," he said. "I'm mad because people are trying to test the character that I am and my integrity. They're not going to steal that away from me, but they're trying to test that." He's primarily referring there, I would say, to people who believe that he was responsible for setting this whole thing up, which, like I said, the FBI and NASCAR concluded he was not a part of. Also in this TV appearance, Bubba Wallace mentions that he's been reading social media. He says he knows he shouldn't be, which I agree. Bubba Wallace should not be reading or looking at social media right now, especially for someone who, a year ago, publicly talked about his battles with depression. I would not be looking at social media right now. Somebody needs to be with Bubba Wallace, making sure he is not indulging in too much social media, because there is just so much discourse out there that is not productive. Much of it is not accurate. Stuff Bubba Wallace should not see. Ultimately, in that TV interview, Bubba Wallace once again reiterated the conversation he had with Steve Phelps. He mentioned how troubling the news was to hear initially, justifying, I would say, why Bubba Wallace responded the way he did Monday and took part in the emotional pre-race festivities. Again, I don't blame him for that type of stuff. Everyone at that point had, I would say, bad information, and I think the bad information was largely thanks to NASCAR jumping the gun and making such strong statements out the gate before an FBI investigation had took hold. So I don't entirely fault Bubba Wallace. You saw, Bubba Wallace was not the only driver Monday afternoon who was, emotional. Everyone in the field, everyone in the industry marched with him, walked with him, stood around him. So you can't look at this and say Bubba Wallace played it up for attention. It's pretty clear everybody took the news that NASCAR broke Sunday night seriously, and I think it's just NASCAR jumping the gun perhaps is the one that made everyone kind of look, they're the ones that made everybody look a little silly in this. It's NASCAR, not Bubba Wallace. But anyway, the only other takeaway from the CNN interview with Bubba Wallace was, he did dwell on the fact that, it was a noose. He made very clear multiple times that what was found in his garage stall was a noose. He understands that it was there, in October, it was there months ago. It was not put there to threaten him or to target him in any way, but Bubba Wallace kind of went off the beaten trail a little bit, it seemed there, and was very adamant that it was a noose. Like, I don't think that's the route Bubba Wallace needs to be taking here if he wants to kind of make goodwill again with a lot of fans. That makes it sound like he's doubling down and still trying to make it sound like he was threatened when the FBI concludes he was not. And so I don't think playing that kind of victim is productive for Bubba Wallace, but most of that interview I thought was spot on, and it details the emotional response Bubba had to the initial news, which again, I don't blame him for at all. In conclusion of this whole thing, thankfully, it turned out to just be a misunderstanding. Like I said earlier, the statement that was made by NASCAR drivers and teams Monday afternoon was a strong one and a positive one. There has been and will likely continue to be a lot of chatter from people not really in NASCAR, and I would encourage hardcore NASCAR fans to just not let that stuff bother you too much. Obviously, it's bad publicity, and I don't subscribe to the idea that any publicity is good publicity. I think there is such a thing as bad publicity, and I think NASCAR is getting a healthy dose of both at the moment. Unfortunately, I do believe NASCAR, the sanctioning body, has lost a little bit of credibility. Based on all the evidence the FBI brought forward, it seems clear that this was not staged. It was simply a misunderstanding. Unfortunately, it was a pretty big misunderstanding and a pretty major news story, partially due to the current social and political climate. But at least now that the facts are out there, I think people can start to kind of move on from this, learn what we can, take the positives away that we possibly can. Ultimately, I'm thrilled that Bubba Wallace was not the victim of a hate crime, and I'm proud of the way the entire industry rallied around him anyways. It proved to me that if one of these drivers was actually threatened at some point, if someone brought or made some sort of racial threat against Bubba Wallace that was legitimate at some point, this weekend was proof to me that the entire industry would be willing to step up and defend Bubba Wallace. So I do believe that is a major positive takeaway from all of this. But I do want to hear what all of you watching think about this entire issue. I'm sure there will be a lot of comments, a wide range of comments, I must say. I'm sure many of you have already left comments. I mean, how many minutes are we into the video? I mean, people usually, it's first. But anyway, like I said, I think it is time we move on, in this episode at least, to talk a little bit about the Talladega TV ratings, because those were revealed earlier yesterday as well. Per Adam Stern, Fox earned a 2.1 rating and 3.35 million viewers for yesterday's thriller at Talladega, making it the most watched makeup NASCAR race, excluding Daytona, since 2014. Pretty good numbers for a rainout, a postponed race. Almost 3.5 million viewers for a Monday afternoon race. I know there's a pandemic. I know there's a lot of people that aren't working, or some people aren't working normal hours. I understand that things are weird, but 3.3 million viewers on a Monday afternoon is incredible. Obviously, as we just spent the entire episode talking about, there was a lot of extra publicity, some good, some bad, but publicity is publicity. It will get eyeballs for at least one day, and eyeballs it seemingly got. Talladega, of course, as I talked about in my video Sunday night or Monday night, was a fantastic race. It was maybe the best NASCAR race I've ever seen in my years of being a fan. It was a phenomenal race, action-packed, exciting, nail-biter thriller. As Adam Stern says, it was a thriller from start to finish. It didn't have any dead zones, any dry periods at any point during the race. I was gritting my teeth anytime Fox went to commercial because I didn't want to miss a second of what I was watching. So it was a phenomenal race. Like I said in my video Monday, it's the kind of race that's going to bring new fans to NASCAR. And so hopefully of that 3.3 million, hopefully there are some new ones in there. I'm sure there were, and hopefully some of those new fans stick around and at least give, maybe sit out Pocono. Maybe tell those fans to sit out Pocono this weekend. I'm not saying Pocono's going to suck, but maybe let them sit out Pocono, bring them back for like the Bristol All-Star race. That, I'm sure they'll enjoy what they see at Bristol here in a few weeks. But needless to say, 3.35 million viewers for a Monday afternoon race is pretty darn good. I know there's a lot of extenuating circumstances behind it, but no matter how you slice it, that's a good number for a postponed race. I mean, that's better than a lot of races do as scheduled on Sunday afternoon. So 3.35 million viewers, definitely I would say a win in NASCAR's book. I guess I should say in Fox's book. They're the ones who really care. They're the ones who keep pushing for the 3 p.m. start times that are frustrating wide swaths of the fan base with those late start times. But yeah, win for Fox, win for NASCAR, at least on Monday, I would say. But yeah, lots to think about. My head has kind of been spinning for the last 48 hours. It's been a whirlwind since Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, and I'm sure it has been for many of you watching as well. But that's all I've got for this episode. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for hearing me talk about this. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe if you are new. We talk about NASCAR almost daily on this channel. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, continue the conversation over there. And of course, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. Could not do this show without the support I get from each and every single one of you. I certainly could not upload daily without the support I get from all of you on Patreon. So I greatly appreciate you guys going the extra mile to support me, support the channel, support the show. Really and truly means a lot. If you missed it yesterday, I uploaded a video with Noah Gragson, the current NASCAR Xfinity Series points leader, 2-time winner, won at Daytona earlier this year. He was super cool to sit down and chat with for a little while. Had a lot of fun with that one, so I encourage you guys to go check that out if you missed it. Got more videos planned for later this week. Of course, Pocono, double header, Saturday and Sunday, gonna be something. Gonna be a lot to watch this weekend, a lot of trickiness at the triangle. But thank you all for watching this episode. Take care, everyone. I will see you again very, very soon.